sometimes the loudest truth is whispered by those no one notices. What would you do if a boy you had never seen before suddenly looked you in the eyes and said, "They're coming for you"? Would you trust him or dismiss him as a stranger? This story is about choices made in seconds that changed entire lives. It is about power, loyalty, betrayal, and what it truly means to protect your own blood. Stay with us until the end, because behind the luxury, the money, and the walls of abundance lies a secret that connects a self-made man, a hidden son, and a family torn apart by shadows. But before we begin, if you enjoy powerful, thought-provoking stories drawn from real lives, tales of love, betrayal, mistakes, and second chances, I'd be grateful if you gave this video a like and hit subscribe. It helps others discover this corner where life itself writes the most dramatic scripts. And share with me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? It's always fascinating to see how these stories travel across the world and connect us all. Now take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's step together into a story that just might change the way you look at life. The evening air inside the grand hall was heavy with the smell of polished wood and expensive liquor. Crystal glasses chimed in the hands of men who spoke in low voices about mergers, assets, and legacies. Among them stood Mikhail Stepny, the man everyone whispered about. He had built his empire with his own hands, climbing out of poverty one ruthless decision at a time. Tonight was supposed to be his crowning moment. Across the table sat Arkadiusz Valen, the aging patriarch of the last great independent bank. His signature would seal the deal. His handshake would confirm Mikhail's seat among the untouchables. Mikhail's hand wrapped around a glass of bourbon, the ice clinking softly as he measured the distance between himself and the future he had dreamed of. Valen smiled faintly, the tired smile of a man who had seen fortunes rise and collapse. They lifted their glasses. For Mikhail, it was more than a toast. It was a declaration the streets no longer owned him. But then the rhythm of the evening broke. In the corner of the room, a door cracked open, and a boy in a torn hoodie slipped inside. He didn't belong here. Too thin, too nervous, his eyes darted across chandeliers and polished shoes until they landed on Mikhail. For a moment, their worlds clashed, and the self-made mogul and the stray who should have been invisible. The boy's lips moved. At first, it seemed like a mistake, a whisper carried by accident, but Mikhail caught the words, "You need to leave. They're here for you." Confusion stirred in his chest. Who was this child, and how did he even know his name? The hall suddenly seemed smaller, the polished laughter of investors sharper, almost threatening. Instinct born from years of surviving the unforgiving streets cut through his hesitation. He set down his glass without finishing it. His eyes swept the hall once more, and he caught something no one else seemed to notice. Men in dark suits near the entrance, not mingling, not drinking, just watching. Their stillness was too deliberate. Mikhail moved. He followed the boy as he slipped back through the service corridor. Marble and chandeliers gave way to stainless steel counters and clattering dishes. The kitchen staff froze, startled by the sight of the suited man chasing a teenager. The boy pushed through the back door, and Mikhail felt the pressure behind him. Heavy footsteps, radios crackling. This wasn't paranoia. Whoever they were closing in. In that instant, the empire he had built, the fortune he had fought for, none of it mattered. What mattered was survival. What mattered was understanding why a boy he didn't know had just saved him. When the cold air hit his face outside, Mikhail realized the night had split into two. Behind him was the deal of a lifetime. Ahead of him was a stranger who carried answers he wasn't ready for, and he had no choice but to follow. The boy glanced back, his eyes sharp, his jaw set as if daring Mikhail to keep up. Mikhail did, because deep inside he already knew this wasn't random. This was personal. The narrow alley behind the grand hall smelled of trash and smoke. The boy ran fast, cutting through shadows with the speed of someone who had done this before. Mikhail's polished shoes slipped on wet pavement as he chased him, but instinct told him not to let go. A turn here, a sharp left there, until they burst into a dim cafe, nearly empty except for an old couple by the window, and a student with headphones lost in his laptop. The boy slid into the farthest booth and motioned with his chin for Mikhail to sit. For a moment, Mikhail just stared at him. The boy was barely a teenager, skin a deep shade, hair messy, hoodie frayed at the sleeves. Yet his eyes, sharp, restless, carrying knowledge he had no right to, pinned Mikhail in place. Mikhail finally sat across from him, voice low, calm. but with the edge of command that had made grown men obey. "Who are you?" The boy shifted, hands restless on the table, then spoke without looking up. "My name's Lex. My mum works in cleaning, here, in that house you were in." Mikhail leaned forward. "And what do you know about men in suits?" Lex swallowed hard. "I was in the back when their car pulled up. I heard them on the radio, said they were here for you, and the banker called it an operation." The words were simple, but the way he said them carried weight. Not full truth, not full lie, something in between. Mikhail's gut told him the boy wasn't just lucky. Before he could press further, Mikhail pulled his phone from his jacket. One number mattered now: Bishop, the man who had cleaned up more storms for him than anyone else. The call connected after one ring. "Talk," Bishop's gravel voice demanded. "Check the hall," Mikhail said sharply. "Now." Static. A pause. Then Bishop's calm tone. "It's live. Task force rolled in. Valen is down. They're locking the place." The cafe seemed to shrink around Mikhail. His world, the empire he built, the deal he almost signed, was burning down behind him. And here sat a boy who had dragged him out before the fire touched. Lex's voice broke the silence. "I didn't want you to get taken. You looked like someone different." Different. The word struck deeper than Mikhail expected. He studied the boy again, the steel grey in his irises. Too familiar, too close. Crowell. The surname hit him like a blow. He had heard it once before, years back, tied to a woman whose face still haunted the corners of his memory. A woman he had walked away from when ambition had no room for family. The boy's age, the mother's job, the stubborn set of his jaw, it all lined up too perfectly. And as the thought clicked into place, Mikhail felt his chest tighten, with something far more dangerous than fear. If Nia had been pregnant back then, the years matched exactly. Mikhail's house stood quiet like an untouched showroom. The polished granite counters, the glass shelves of bourbon lined with designer labels, the leather furniture, everything screamed success. Yet walking into it after the chaos of the night, it felt hollow, like a stage set where the actors had gone home. His wife and daughter were away on yet another trip. No voices, no footsteps, just silence and the faint hum of the refrigerator. He poured himself a drink, the kind of commercial perfect bourbon pour that once symbolized victory, and stared at the glass. Tonight it burned like guilt. The phone buzzed. Bishop had delivered. A locked folder with files, names, dates. Mikhail scrolled quickly, heart pounding harder with every line. Nia Crowell, age 38. Former economist, bright graduate, once praised in trade magazines. Career derailed after she left the finance world. Multiple small jobs, years of instability. For the last decade, cleaning staff at the very house where Mikhail had nearly signed away his future tonight. Attached photo. Tired eyes, worn uniform, but the same face he had once known. Then the second file. Lex Crowell. Born 13 years ago. No father listed. The image. The boy from the cafe. Hoodie and restless eyes. His eyes. Mikhail put down the phone, breath shallow. Bishop's note was blunt. Probability? Biological son, 90%. The bourbon glass trembled in his hand. 15 years ago, ambition had demanded sacrifice. He told himself walking away was survival. Now the past had stepped back into his life with steel grey eyes. The buzz came again, a supplemental report. It was not about Nia this time, but her neighbourhood. Bishop's words were short but heavy. Controlled by Pine Crew, leader, Shamar Gage, violent, recruitment through teens, using kids for runs, high risk. Mikhail pictured Lex again, sharp but too thin, carrying himself with a toughness that didn't belong on a child. His chest clenched. He knew exactly what recruitment meant. He left the house. The streets where Nia lived told a different story than the marble halls he was used to. Cracked pavement, sour smell of damp stairwells, broken lights buzzing above peeling paint. Life here was survival on its rawest terms. The neighbour who opened her door was older, wrapped in a faded robe, eyes sharp with suspicion. She looked Mikhail up and down, his tailored jacket too loud for this place. "You looking for the Crowells?" she asked. "Yes," Mikhail replied carefully. She sniffed. "They ain't been around. But that boy? He's out too much. Wrong hours, wrong people. She leaned closer, lowering her voice as if speaking prophecy. "That child is tying himself to the wrong crew. Mark my words." Her words pierced deeper than she realized. Wrong crew. Mikal already knew who she meant. Pine Crew wasn't just rumor. They were wolves hunting for the youngest, hungriest, easiest to bend. As he thanked her and stepped back into the night air, Bishop's last line replayed in his head. "Shamar Gage runs his boys out of the old dovecote by the pond." The name stuck like a thorn. A dovecote turned into a den. A place where kids like Lex could disappear into the system of gangs never to come back. Mikal stood in the damp night, the smell of mildew clinging to his clothes, and for the first time in years he felt true dread. Not for his empire, not for his freedom, but for a boy who might carry his blood. And the path forward was pulling him straight toward the dovecote. The old dovecote stood crooked on a hill above the pond, its wooden boards rotting, its windows covered with scrap metal and graffiti. From the outside it looked abandoned, but music throbbed from within, low bass shaking the damp walls. A yellow light flickered through the cracks. Mikal pushed the door open. The stale air hit him first, cheap cologne mixed with smoke, alcohol and sweat. Around a table scattered with bottles sat 4 men. Their laughter stopped the moment they saw him. At the far end, leaning back like a king in his crumbling castle, was Shamar Gage. Tall, heavy shoulders, scar on his cheek, knife resting easy in his palm as if it belonged there. "Who the hell are you?" Shamar's voice carried both curiosity and threat. Mikal's tone didn't waver. "I'm looking for Lex Crowell. I'm his father." For a second there was silence. Then one of the men burst out laughing. Another joined in, pointing at Mikal's suit, polished shoes, the way he didn't belong in this ruined nest. Shamar didn't laugh. He leaned forward, knife tapping lightly on the table, eyes fixed on Mikal. "Father, huh? And where you been all these years, Papa?" "That's between me and him. Where is he?" Shamar's grin widened. "You don't get to walk in here and make demands. You want information, it costs." The room felt tighter. Mikal's hand stayed loose at his sides, but inside every instinct screamed danger. "How much?" he asked. Shamar opened his mouth, but one of his crew spoke first. A younger man with restless hands, too quick with his tongue. "Man, why you even asking? The kid was here, sure, but he's too small, too jumpy. Ain't ready for—" "Shut up, Rashid," Shamar snapped, turning on him with a glare sharp enough to cut. But the damage was done. Lex had been here. Mikal's chest tightened. He was close, too close. Shamar's knife scraped against the wood. "Here's the deal, Papa. You pay me, I'll find him for you. Maybe he walks back here, maybe he don't. Either way, your pocket's open, or you walk out blind." Before Mikal could answer, the back of the building cracked with the noise. The metal door flew open, shouts filling the air. Bishop's team stormed in through the roof and the side entrance, black-clad, fast, efficient. Guns raised, commands shouted, "Hands up, don't move!" The gang froze, Shamar snarling as 2 men forced him against the wall. His knife clattered to the floor. Mikal scanned every corner of the room, every shadow. No boy, no Lex. Then one of Bishop's men called from outside, "Boss, over here!" They followed him across the lot, past weeds and broken glass, to a small wooden shed half buried by trees. Inside, the air was damp and cold. On the floor lay a thin mattress, still warm, a bottle of water unopened, a half-eaten sandwich, and on top of the blanket, a jacket Mikal recognized instantly. Lex's. Mikal touched the fabric, his fingers tightening. The boy had been here minutes ago. He had slept here, hidden here, but now the place was empty, too close. He had been within reach, and still he had slipped away. Mikal stood in the doorway of the shed, night air pressing down heavy. Bishop's men moved around him, securing the site, but all he could see was that jacket. Proof that his son was near, yet already gone. The hunt wasn't over, it had only grown sharper. The emergency ward smelled of disinfectant and sleepless nights. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Mikal walked down the narrow corridor, his polished shoes too loud against cracked tiles. Nurses glanced up, surprised by the expensive suit at this hour in this place. He ignored their looks. His chest carried only one thought: find Lex. A doctor with weary eyes stepped out of an office, holding a folder of x-rays. "You're here for the Crowell boy?" "Yes." The man studied him for a beat too long. Who are you to him? Mikhail hesitated only a second before the words came out. I'm his father. The doctor nodded slowly, then opened the folder. Your son says he fell down a staircase, but these images don't match that story. 2 fractured ribs, concussion, multiple contusions. This is not a fall, this is a beating. Mikhail's jaw clenched. He already knew. May I see him? The doctor led him into a small ward. Lex lay on a narrow bed, pale under the thin blanket. His lips split, eye swollen, IV taped to his arm. And there, on his wrist, the truth. A fresh black dot, crude and unmistakable. Mikhail knew the mark. Pine Crew's initiation, a stain that branded the youngest recruits before they were fully trapped. For a long moment, Mikhail just stood there, staring at the boy, his boy, broken in a place he should never have been. Lex stirred, opening his eyes. They focused slowly on Mikhail, recognition flashing across his bruised face. You again? From the restaurant. Yes, Est, Mikhail said quietly, pulling a chair close. How do you feel? The boy tried to shrug but winced. I'm fine. No, you're not. Mikhail's voice softened. Lex, I need to tell you something. Something I should have said long ago. The boy looked at him, suspicious, guarded. I am your father. 15 years ago I knew your mother. When she told me she was pregnant, I was a coward. I walked away. I thought ambition was more important than family. I was wrong. I was wrong. Lex's eyes darkened. So you left us? Yes, Mikhail forced the words through the lump in his throat. I was afraid, and I've regretted it every day since. The silence that followed was sharp. Then Lex turned his face away. Doesn't matter. None of it matters. They have my mum. Mikhail's heart slammed in his chest. What do you mean? Lex swallowed hard. His voice was hoarse. They said if I didn't do what they asked, they'd keep her. Or worse. They gave me a package. Told me to put it in some businessman's car, then call the cops. That's the deal. Mikhail felt the floor tilt beneath him. A package. A plant. A frame-up. His son. Forced into a trap that could destroy lives. And Nia, held as collateral. He gripped the boy's hand gently, careful of the IV. You don't have to carry this alone. I will get her back. And I will get you out of this. For the first time, Lex's guarded stare wavered. Hope flickered behind the pain. Mikhail leaned closer, voice steady, even as rage burned inside him. I failed you once. I will not fail you again. The night was almost spent when Bishop slid a thin folder across Mikhail's desk. 3 possible sites. Old warehouses used by Pine Crew. He tapped one with his finger. An abandoned textile plant just past the Beltway. Movement spotted there. Cars coming in and out. If they've got her anywhere, it's here. The convoy rolled out before dawn, headlights swallowed by empty roads. 2 SUVs in front, Mikhail's car in the middle, another behind. 12 men, all armed, all silent. Bishop briefed them again as the horizon bled with the first hint of light. 2 teams, Alpha goes through the front, Bravo wraps to the back, we breach on my signal, 1 hour until sunrise. The factory loomed from the weeds, a block of concrete with windows shattered and roof half collapsed. It smelled of rust and wet dust. One guard stood smoking near the main door, oblivious to the hunters circling him. He went down without sound, hands bound, eyes wide. Inside, shadows moved. The echo of laughter, clinking bottles, and then a woman's cry. Mikhail froze when he saw her. Nia, thinner, face drawn, wrists bruised, shoved forward as a shield. Shamar Gage stood behind her, his hand locked in her hair, pistol jammed against her temple. His eyes gleamed when he saw Mikhail step into the light. Don't move, Shamar barked. 1 step closer, and she's done. His crew shifted, nervous at the sight of Bishop's men spreading through the space, guns levelled but steady. Shamar's voice rose. Here's what I want. Clear path to that door, a car outside, and 100 grand in cash. You give me that, she lives. Bishop's hand twitched, waiting for Mikhail's word. But Mikhail moved first. He raised his hands, voice carrying. Take me instead. Shamar blinked. What? Me? I'm worth more alive than she is, a known name. If you walk me out of here, you'll get your cash and more. Nia's eyes widened. She shook her head violently. No, Mikhail! Shama's grip tightened, dragging her closer. He studied Mikhail, torn between greed and fear. The promise of ransom burned bright, but so did the risk of crossing a man whose reach could choke him later. His teeth ground as he weighed it. Why would I trust you? Because I don't lie about money, Mikhail shot back. I give my word and my word stands. The tension snapped like a wire stretched too thin. Shama shoved Nia aside just enough, lunging forward to grab Mikhail by the collar. The gun wavered. For an instant his eyes flicked down, and that instant was enough. Mikhail drove his elbow hard into Shama's ribs. The gun went off, bullet punching a hole in the ceiling. Dust rained down as Bishop's team surged. Two men tore Nia free, dragging her behind cover. Others hit Shama like a wave, slamming him against the concrete wall. His pistol clattered across the floor. Mikhail stood in the chaos, chest heaving, dust swirling in the beam of a broken light. Shama roared, muscles straining, but Bishop pressed a knee to his neck, cuffs snapping closed. Nia collapsed into Mikhail's arms, trembling but alive. Her breath came in short gasps, eyes wide with disbelief. It's over, Mikhail whispered, holding her tight as Bishop's men secured the rest of the crew. For the first time in 15 years, she was in his arms again, and this time he wasn't letting go. The hospital wing was quiet except for the hum of machines and the shuffle of tired nurses. Mikhail stood back as Nia rushed into the room, her breath catching when she saw her son awake. Lex sat propped up on a thin pillow, bandages visible beneath the hospital gown, bruises blooming dark against his young skin. For a long second they only stared. Then mother and son clutched each other in silence. No music, no speeches, only ragged breathing and tears. Mikhail stayed near the door, every muscle locked. He had faced boardrooms full of rivals, men with guns in alleys, but the sight of that embrace shook him deeper than any bullet could. When Lex finally pulled back, his eyes cut toward Mikhail. The boy's voice cracked. "Why'd you tell me he was dead?" Nia froze, her face folding with shame. "Because it was easier," she whispered. "Easier than explaining why he left. I wanted you to believe your father was gone, not that he chose to walk away." The words hit like glass underfoot. Lex turned to Mikhail, anger barely masking hurt. "So which one is it? Dead or just didn't care?" Mikhail took a slow step forward, stopping at the edge of the bed. His voice was low but steady. "I was a coward. I don't ask forgiveness. I only ask for a chance now. To protect you both. To build something I should have given you from the start." The boy looked away, jaw tight. Nia smoothed his hair, her own tears streaking down. For the first time the truth lay, naked in the room, heavy and raw. The door opened quietly. Bishop stepped in, a phone in his hand. Holmes Justinson, eyes sharp as always. "We've set up a protective perimeter," he said. "2 men outside the ward, rotation every 6 hours. Nobody walks in unless cleared." He laid a sealed envelope on the nightstand. "New SIM card. Burn the old number. From now on you don't answer anything that isn't filtered through us." Nia nodded, gripping the envelope as if it were a lifeline. Lex frowned. "So we're prisoners now?" "Protected," Bishop corrected. "There's a difference." Mikhail met Bishop's gaze across the room. The weight of gratitude pressed on him, but so did the unspoken question. How long before outside eyes turned suspicion back on him? Because even now, as the dust settled from the factory raid, Federal Task Force analysts were running footage, marking timestamps, noting the presence of a wealthy man on the scene, and one line of thought had already sparked inside the bureau. What if Mikhail Crowell wasn't just caught in this storm? What if he was playing both sides? The next morning, Mikhail sat alone in his office, blinds half drawn against the glare of dawn. 3 folders lay across the desk like silent verdicts. One marked Shamar Gage, Pine Crew's dossier, rap sheets and photos stapled tight. The second, Nia Lex, a file Bishop's team had compiled overnight, documenting years of hardship reduced to sterile bullet points. And the third, Valen Federal. That last one bled ink heavier than the rest. As Mikhail skimmed the pages, another name kept surfacing like oil on water. Sterling Pike, Not Valen, not even directly tied to the collapsed acquisition, but always hovering in the shadows. Pike's holding companies, his consultancy, and a grey subsidiary tied to asset seizures. The puzzle snapped in place. Valen's empire had been just one mask. Pike ran the leverage in the dark, pulling strings with blackmail and debt. The intercom buzzed. His assistant's voice. "A gentleman named Foster is here. No appointment." Mikhail stiffened. Seconds later, a tall man in an unremarkable blazer entered, no badge displayed, only calm eyes that carried authority. He set down a paper cup. "Relax, just coffee." "Agent Foster?" Mikhail asked. The man smiled faintly. "Call it a courtesy call, don't mistake my tone. The task force knows where you were last night. Knows you walked into a warehouse before our people swept it. You're not a target, yet. But let me be clear. Do not interfere with federal operations again. You've got resources, fine. Keep them away from ours. Otherwise, next time it won't be coffee." Mikhail held his stare, then inclined his head. "Message received." Foster drained his cup and walked out, leaving silence heavier than gunfire. Moments later, the door opened again. Yara Stone stepped in, arms crossed, eyes sharp. Unlike Foster, her presence wasn't threat, but challenge. "You've got a decision to make," she said flatly. "Nia isn't just a victim. She's a trained economist. I've seen the records. Put her through courses, bring her into financial control. She deserves a chance to climb, not just survive." Mikhail leaned back, rubbing his temple. "You think she'd even accept that from me?" "She'll accept it from herself," Yara shot back. "Give her the ladder. Let her choose if she wants to climb." The words cut deep, because he knew she was right. Bishop entered then, holding a tablet. His tone was clipped. "We traced the electronic signature on that package Lex was supposed to plant. The drop point, the trigger signal, all of it." He turned the screen so Mikhail could see. "It doesn't point to you." "Then who?" Bishop zoomed in on a routing ID. One name glared back. Erling Pike. The office seemed to tilt. For weeks, Pike had been the ghost in every corridor of power. Now he wasn't just background noise. He was the architect. And Mikhail knew, to protect Nia and Lex, he had to peel the mask from a man who never showed his real face. Mikhail had thought the storm would wait. Instead, it greeted him at the next negotiation table. Arkady Valen sat across from him, shoulders straighter than his age should allow, his voice calm but edged with fatigue. The old banker shuffled papers, but the subtext was heavier than numbers. "Mikhail," Valen said quietly, "this mess with Pine Crew, it was never my design. Pike handled the auxiliary channels. I admit I turned a blind eye, but don't think I plan to drag you into it." For the first time, Mikhail believed him. Valen looked like a man who'd carried an empire too long, and now the seams were splitting. But trust was a luxury. Mikhail laid a hand flat on the polished table. "There's no deal unless we crack the foundation. I want full due diligence, not just the balance sheets you parade for investors. I want the basement, Arkady, the shell firms, the off-books accounts, the hidden partnerships, everything." Valen's jaw tightened. "That will scorch earth." "Better ash than poison," Mikhail said. The words hung final as a gavel, but outside those walls, Sterling Pike was already moving first. By midday, social media lit up with the kind of chaos only money could buy. Anonymous accounts dropped screenshots, Stepney seen with Pine Crew associates, blurry photos of Mikhail near the warehouse circulated alongside captions screaming, "Billionaire bankrolls street gangs." Others twisted the story. Hero father rescues secret son from violent crew. It wasn't just gossip. It was a storm. Cable panels argued in split screens. Was Mikhail the symbol of corruption or redemption? Hashtags trended by the hour, his name paired with words like blood money and hidden child. Inside his office, Yara threw her phone on the desk, disgusted. "They're painting you as both savior and criminal. Pike doesn't need facts. Just noise," Bishop added, voice flat. "The leak trail points to a media shell Sterling owns offshore. He wanted this blowtorch lit." Mikhail rubbed his temples. If he thinks this smoke will make me crawl, he miscalculated. But he knew. Reputation fire spreads faster than truth. That evening, a call came from the county holding cell. Shmar Gage. The voice on the line was strained but still carried that half-cocky rhythm. "Stepney, you want Pike?" "I got to his pager logs, numbers, calls, timestamps. Enough to show who's been feeding who." Mikhail stayed silent, letting him hang on the pause. "But," Shamar continued, "it ain't free. My sister's name is on one of those indictments. She's no soldier man, just caught in paperwork. You pull her out, and I hand you the log." The line crackled, the weight of the offer pressing hard. Bishop's men could trace accounts, but logs, real-time connections to Pike, that was dynamite. Mikhail set the phone down, eyes narrowing. The smoke around him was choking, but maybe, just maybe, Shamar was offering fire. Rima Gage's name showed up not in gang files, but in loan ledgers. Bishop spread the printouts across the table like a map of hidden traps. Small microfinance companies, storefront outfits with bright colours but predatory teeth, had her locked down with impossible debts. The trail wound upward. Those lenders were shells stacked and restacked, until they bent back toward accounts affiliated with Sterling Pike. Yara leaned over the paperwork, her voice sharp. "This isn't random street debt. Pike's people use these loans as funnels. They secure fake collateral, then pass it through a daughter bank. Clean money out, blood money in." Mikhail traced the chain with his finger, each arrow leading to another name, another layer. It wasn't just laundering, it was a spider's web, and Raymer was caught at the centre, collateralized like she was property. The call came from Agent Foster, her tone clipped but not hostile. "You want Pike? You've got 24 hours. Bring me proof that ties his microfinance play to Valen's structures, and I'll take him off your board. After that, I pull you in as obstruction." It was an ultimatum sharp as glass. 24 hours to turn suspicion into steel. For the first time, Nia Crowell sat at the negotiation table. Not as a ghost from the past, not as a mother holding her son close, but as an analyst, her old training cutting through fatigue. Her hands trembled at first, but once the numbers lit the screen, her voice steadied. "Look here," she said, pointing to a cluster of transactions. "They aren't linear. The cascade of payment doubles back. This isn't flow, it's a loop." Bishop frowned. "A loop?" "Exactly," Nia answered. "They recycle the same capital through 3 shells, then reclassify it as new credit. It looks like organic repayment, but it's staged. That's the crack you can show Foster." Mikhail studied her face, focused, precise, alive in a way he hadn't seen since before everything collapsed. Yara gave a slow nod, grudging but respectful. She just found the hole that blows this whole thing open. With the evidence aligned, Bishop's people moved fast. Raymer was pulled out of the system, her debts cancelled by pressure applied at the right joints. She walked out of a side office, exhausted, clutching nothing but a plastic bag of her belongings. Her eyes darted when she saw Mikhail. "Shamar said you'd come, thought he was lying." "He made sure you were free," Mikhail said simply. By dusk, the pager logs landed on his desk, handed over in exchange for his sister's release. The codes and timestamps were brutal in their clarity, chains of calls, numbers cross-linked with Pike's network. But what struck hardest wasn't what Pike was doing, it was what Shamar wasn't. "He's not the mastermind," Bishop muttered, scanning the logs. "He's a pawn. Every move he made was triggered by a number tied higher up." Mikhail exhaled slowly. He had thought dragging Shamar down would clear the field. But the logs painted a darker picture. Pike was pulling strings all along, and Shamar Gage was just another piece on the board. Pager logs were brutal in their honesty. They traced not just street calls, but mirrored links, direct routes to Sterling Pike. Bishop pinned the last sheet with his knuckle. Every order Shamar carried, every packet, every threat, it wasn't his voice. It was Pike, and not just Pike. He flipped to a second name, a board member from a polished charity council. Then another. These weren't corner hustlers. They were men who cut ribbons in auditoriums, gave scholarships, wore lapel pins for causes. Mikhail stared at the names, a slow fire burning in his chest. All the backroom deals, all the pressure, all the ruined lives, it wasn't chaos. It was curated, pressed into neat columns of false philanthropy. When Valen heard, he didn't shout. He simply closed his hands around the arms of his chair and said evenly, "If this is true, Pike dies with the company. The deal stands only if you bring me proof he's excised." It was a severing. Valen was ruthless, but he prized survival over loyalty. Pike had overplayed. Mikhail understood what came next could not be private. He took the stage at a tech hub downtown, Not with numbers on screens, but with something sharper. Cameras clicked. Reporters leaned forward. He announced the launch of the Second Ledger Foundation, a program funding cybersecurity programs and scholarships in schools across the same neighborhoods where Pine Crew had hunted recruits. "It isn't branding," Mikhail said, his voice steady. "It's restitution. Wealth means nothing if it isn't protection for the next generation." Then he stepped aside, and Lex walked forward in a pressed shirt that still looked a little too big on him. He unfolded a single sheet of paper and read, his voice soft but unwavering. "Nobility is a verb. It is not who you are. It is what you do." The room was quiet. Reporters didn't shout. They listened. For a moment, it wasn't scandal or spin, it was clarity. Hours later, clarity turned into action. Black SUVs rolled up to Sterling Pike's glass office tower. Federal agents poured through the lobby, vests marked in bold letters, screens froze on desktops, phones sealed in silver bags. Executives who once smiled on magazine covers were led out with wrists bound, heads low. From his own window across the city, Mikhail watched the feed. Accounts were frozen, boards dissolved, voices of denial drowned by the sound of doors slamming shut. For weeks, Pike had looked untouchable. Now he was boxed, stripped, catalogued. Bishop said nothing. He just turned the volume down on the TV and left the silence to breathe. Because silence was what power sounded like when it shifted hands. Months rolled on and the headlines shifted. What had once been firestorms of scandal cooled into the grind of reform. In the office, Naya no longer carried a mop bucket or badge for cleaning shifts. She wore a lanyard or a laptop bag slung over her shoulder, and her name etched on reports in the Finance Control Division. She was no mascot, no symbol propped up for optics. She was a professional, and when her analyses caught discrepancies, they were read, respected, and folded into policy. Beside her, Yara Stone made space at the table, not by shielding her, but by pushing her forward. "This one's Nia's call. Let her walk you through it." Respect came not from pity, but performance. Lex bore his own marks of change. The black dot tattoo on his wrist, once raw and fresh, was now gone. The scar was faint, a pale crescent barely visible under new skin. He touched it less and less. In its place was a band from a coding academy, an ID for late nights in a tech hub where he mapped algorithms instead of alleyways. His mentors called him quick, sometimes stubborn, often brilliant. For the first time, the word future meant more than just escape. Michael Stepney stood again across from Arkady Vallon, but this time the contract spread on the table was different. Numbers mattered, yes, but so did clauses. A charter appended to the deal required quarterly audits open to public eyes, a council of neighborhood trustees, and hiring quotas favoring the zip codes Pine Crew once prowled. Vallon's face was unreadable as he signed, but his pen didn't pause. The Empire would not be private shadows anymore. It would be shared, visible, accountable. Shemar Gage heard his sentence read aloud in a courtroom stripped of music and swagger. Years stretched ahead of him. Yet in the gallery sat his sister Rayma, no longer tethered to predatory debts. She held papers for a program in the Second Ledger Foundation. Tuition grants, training, and counseling. Her path was clean, not easy, but real. When she left the courthouse, she did not look back at the brother who once called her collateral. She looked forward. And in the Imperial House, once a nest of crystal chandeliers and velvet deals, life had a quieter rhythm. The lobby no longer waited for men in dark suits. A modest placard at the reception desk read, "Now hirings and trainee program. Young faces stepped through daily, resumes folded with hope." On one autumn evening, Lex passed through the same revolving door where chaos had once begun. He paused at the marble counter, smiled faintly at the sign, then moved on, his shoulders no longer hunched by fear. Somewhere upstairs, in a corner booth, a glass clinked. Ice chimed softly against whiskey, but it sounded different now, less like tension, more like renewal. A voiceover, clear and low, carried the weight of it all. Sometimes a house is not its walls, it is the choice you make when someone tells you run.